Gophers Coaches Corner.
Hey fans, Bobbie Bohlig here. Today we're super excited to be joined by the Gophers baseball coach, John Anderson, who joins us from his home in Wayzata. Coach, thanks so much for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Bobbie. Enjoy the opportunity to visit.
Coach, obviously this spring looks a lot different than what you're used to. What does a typical day look like now for you?
Well, some days you wake up and it feels like Groundhog Day. It's like yesterday, right? Anyway, it changes somewhat day to day just based on what's on the schedule and whether we have any meetings on the agenda. So it varies day to day. Thankfully, the golf courses has opened up, so I've been able to sneak out there once in a while and get some fresh air. And I think probably the only good part about it all is the fact that it's been an opportunity, at least for me, to feel like I've had a chance to reflect a little bit on my career and our program and some of our processes and the way we're doing things and whether we want to make some changes and just try to relook at your program and see if there might be a better way to do some of those things.
With the season ending, so abruptly, what do you anticipate the impact it will have on players that would be seniors and of course your recruiting?
Well, obviously things changed rather quickly on March 12th and when the pandemic canceled our season. And so quickly you realize that number one, our players are going to lose a season of competition for the most part. We did play, I think, 18 games, but again, so your first thoughts drift to the players and all the time and energy and work they put into their careers and not having an opportunity to play the season. And then you start looking at the impact it's going to have. It's a problem that has many factors to it, and there's no easy answers, and we're just going to have to go kind of year by year here and try to sort it out and be transparent with the players.
Well, Coach, aside from the pandemic, a big reason we wanted to do this is we want to get to know the coaches that lead the programs at the U. You have probably one of the best resumes at the U. You've been around the university for quite some time. I know you started there as a player, obviously now a coach. I'd love for you, though, to take us back to the very beginning. I know you initially walked on as a pitcher. What led you, though, to want to be a Gopher?
Well, first and foremost, I think for every young boy, young man that grew up in the state of Minnesota, your dream was to play for Dick Siebert at the University of Minnesota. They won national championships in 56, 60, and 64. And, he was a legend, and everybody wanted to play it. If you love baseball and you were passionate, you felt like you had some ability, everybody wanted to play at the University of Minnesota for Dick Siebert. It was the only Division I program in the state. And so obviously that was the goal. He traveled around the state and put on clinics and communities all over the state in the summertime. And he came to our little small town in northern Minnesota, Keewatin, Minnesota, and when I was a junior in high school and put on a clinic. And so just to have him come to your community and put on a clinic and a legend like that, it was, in some ways, it was like the Pope showing up in your community. So that's a memory I'll never forget.
Looking back, was there a conversation you remember with Coach Siebert that, still sticks with you today?
Well, he wasn't known to have a lot of personal conversations with his players. And back then we had a JV, there were 60, 70 players running around and I'm not sure he even knew who they all were. But I do remember the first conversation in person I had, and we were sitting in his office and of course, Paul Molitor was going to be a freshman that year. He comes in, sticks his head through the door, and Coach Siebert had cataracts, so the lights were always very low in there. He had a little desk lamp that he used. The light had bothered his vision. He was trying to read and do paperwork. And so Paul stuck his head in. I didn't know who Paul Molitor was. I'd heard of him, but I didn't know who he was. And he had the 70s long hair and beard, if I remember right, and stuck his head in there. And he says, "Hi, Chief." And he says, "Who's that?" He goes, "It's Paul Molitor." He said, "Paul Molitor?" He said, "I want you to know that we have tougher rules around here than the Oakland A's, so you better get that beard shaved and the haircut. If you want to be in this program." And Paul kind of snuck away, and that was the first opportunity I had to have a conversation with Dick Siebert, and Paul and I still laugh about that and remember that. And if you remember the Oakland A's, they're featured in Major League Baseball with their long hair and white shoes and beards and mustaches, and that was his comment. So that was my first introduction.
Coach, that's a great story. Did you have a mentor growing up or a coach you wanted to model your program after you got the opportunity someday?
Well, obviously, I had a high school football coach that was an old, crusty old guy, very similar to Dick Siebert, tough guy. We were coached a little differently than we are today, and his name was Angelo Tatti, and he had a tremendous way of, in his own way, and some tough love once in a while of getting the most out of his players. But I always felt like he cared, and even though some days you wondered if he cared based on what he said to you or how he treated you in terms of your performance wasn't up to speed. But I always remembered the fact that I felt like he cared about me, and that never left me. And so I've tried to instill that as I've gone forward in my career to make sure, as there's a saying, players don't care what you know until they know you care, and that you care about them as people, and you're with them regardless of their ERA, their batting average, and so that's stuck with me.
That's awesome, Coach. When you do decide to, hang up the cleats and walk away from the game or walk away from coaching, what would you say is the one maybe lesson that you learned from the sport that you will take with you?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think obviously I think the one thing I've kind of reflected and been able to get better at through my career is don't let the scoreboard define you or the standings define you as a person and as a coach. I think sometimes in coaching, when the players don't perform and you don't play well or have a good season or really feel like you've met your expectations of the talent level you have, you take it personally, and you feel like it was your fault. You didn't do your part, or you're a bad coach because you had a bad game. And I think I've learned not to judge my effectiveness and the job that I've done and how I've been able to impact people's lives by just the scoreboard and the standings and championships. It's more about the impact you feel like you've had on somebody to help them overcome some adversity or help them get recentered or find their way on their journey or help them, through a difficult time in their lives. I've tried to stay more focused on the bigger picture and keep a healthier perspective on what we're here for. And I constantly have to remind myself, why do you coach? Why are you here? And I'm not just here to win games and win championships and make sure the standings end up on the right side. Believe me, we're competitive and we've won our fair share. But at the end of the day, I have to remind myself, I'm really here to impact the player's life and help prepare them for their journey. And I think that's what I've learned the most over my long career. That wasn't the case the first 10 or 15 years of my career. It was all about winning and losing.
Yeah.
And I rode the roller coaster, and oh boy, it was a miserable way to live. And I've tried to stay away from that. And I've tried to pass that on to the players that don't define yourself by your batting average or your ERA. Whether we won or lost today, you're good people. You have a lot to offer the world, and all we can do is our best. And sometimes it's not reflected in the scoreboard.
Well, Coach, we really appreciate you doing this with us. I know you probably have the golf course. It's a pretty nice day out today. So I will let you go, but we just want to say good luck moving forward, and we're excited to watch the team next season.
Thank you, Bobbie, for reaching out, and I appreciate the interview and the support of our program.
Thanks, Coach.